It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is best-selling author Mark Schaefer, and we're going to be pondering the way forward for sales and marketing professionals as we navigate a business landscape unalterably impacted and changed by the coronavirus pandemic. Mark, it's good to have you back on the show. Welcome.
Well, I suppose I'm glad to be here, Shaun,
Well,
under the circumstances. But look, it's truly and sincerely a delight to always talk with you, my friend.
Well, and it's interesting. I had a number of interviews I scheduled weeks back and had plans to talk about other things. In fact, I had intended to take this conversation in a different direction, but here we are in the middle of what we didn't expect to happen. So we may as well speak about the things that folks want to be hearing about right now. And you've had a ton of helpful content recently on your blog. So we're going to riff off some of the topics you've been writing about lately. So the first place I'd like us to go is some of the non-obvious coronavirus implications that we are facing as marketing professionals. And one of the first ones I wanted to have you start with is asking ourselves the question of, am I relevant this month, or how can I be relevant this month? Because I think for a lot of us, we were struggling to figure out, okay, how do I still speak to my audience, my tribe, and not sound like I'm trying to take advantage of people? How can I be like serving and helpful? So what do we need to think about in terms of being relevant right now?
Well, I'll just tell maybe just like a brief personal story that, so for example, I've been working in consulting for this amazing company in Miami, a group of people that have really become my friends. And so they had sent me an email and they said, Mark, we're going to make some changes to our social media positioning. We want to set up a call with you. I sent an email back. I said, sure. When can you talk next week? Never heard back from them. So I wrote an email, said, wanted to make sure that I didn't miss something. And they said, well, Mark, with this, we're in crisis right now. Everything has changed in the last 3 days. Our supply chain has dried up. Our sales have declined by 50%, and we're all hands on deck in crisis mode. So basically, in the period of a week, I went from relevant to irrelevant. And I think we need to assess that with everyone right now, is to think about we're in a new normal. And it may not be a temporary one. I want to add that, but let's just talk about what's going on right now. We need to reassess, are we relevant in this moment? And how do we reapply our skills and core competencies in a way that meet the unmet and underserved needs of our customers right now? So let me give you an example of, what I'm seeing is a few days ago, I got an email from a local rancher, somebody that grows cattle. And he said, hey, we know that you enjoy going to our local restaurants and you're not going to be able to do this in this crisis. We will bring our steaks to you. Now, this is a B2B business, but they're looking at what are the unmet and underserved needs of people right now. I just made a trip to Kroger. There are no steaks. It's sold out, right? But this guy is saying, all right, where are people now? Look at what U-Haul is doing. Millions of college students have been evicted from their dormitories and apartments with almost no notice. Some of them are very far away from home. They don't have cars. They don't have ways to get all this stuff home. U-Haul said, we will give you free storage for a month. Just get yourself out of these apartments. Don't worry about it. All right. I didn't even know U-Haul had storage. So now they're on my radar screen. And they're building a new customer base, right? By looking at these needs in the moment. So this is a period of incredible opportunity, but we have to reevaluate our relevance for this moment and for the real lives of our customers right now.
Well, I think on the one hand, one reaction, as you've stated, might be that people are going to pick up their ball and go home because, gosh, I'm no longer relevant. What do I do? I think the other extreme might be just this desperate rush to produce something new. And I feel like there's a balance in there somewhere. Like it is giving some of us time to implement products and processes and things that we haven't had time to work on. But at the same time, I feel like you could just rush to put something out there for the sake of putting something out
Yeah.
there without really thinking of how people are buying, what they need right now. So any thoughts on what we
Well,
should be doing in terms of rush to produce right now?
well, first of all, um, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now. There's a lot of stuff being introduced very quickly that is awkward, that is tone deaf, that certainly isn't strategic. So, part of me sort of rolls my eyes and said, "Oh my gosh, that's just not the right thing to do right now." But another part of me says is, we need to extend grace to these people because we can't really judge them right now. Everybody's just trying to keep some cash coming in and feed their families.
Right.
So I'm not going to be too harsh on anything that anybody does right now because there are no rules. There is no playbook. Now, what I would encourage people to do is try to not be reactive and just start throwing stuff out there to see what will stick. Take a deep breath, really, look at, what's going to be happening with your customers. And, by the way, you know, a lot of these new habits that we're seeing now are going to be the new normal, right? So, I mean, if we're in some sort of a lockdown for a couple of days, no big deal. If we're in a lockdown for a couple of weeks or months, we're going to be learning new traditions and habits around, let's say, work. Well, first of all, obviously, working from home. All right. And the reason that working from home never really worked too well before is because companies didn't invest in the technology and management processes to really make it work. But now they have. They've had to. And we're going to get really good at it. All right. So think about the unmet and underserved needs of people that work from home, because that's going to make it through to the other side. Our relationship with food, I think there's going to be profound things that are happening. We're rediscovering cooking, right? Cooking with our children, learning new skills, learning new habits, learning that's going to make it to the other side. It is. Entertainment. People are learning to connect with people remotely in new ways. They're already getting bored with Netflix. They're rediscovering board games. They're finding new ways to entertain their children. And guess what? When we get to the other side, the children are going to say, "Can we do that tonight? Can we do that game tonight?" So, and there's travel, conferences, almost everything you can think of is that there are going to be new habits that transcend the crisis. And so it pays for us to think strategically and not just react right now.
Another thing you wrote within the last week was asking the question, like, how do we sell in a coronavirus environment? And
Yeah.
the helpful perspective I thought you gave was that we need to be looking kind of through this lens of grief and this lens of mourning, and that we need to have compassion and kind of use that as the focus for building relationships with how we're interacting with our communities right now. Would love to have you give just a little bit of commentary about how people can do that effectively, or maybe how you've already seen other businesses and organizations doing that right now.
Well, that's an interesting question, Shaun. Um, I've been doing a lot of coaching and counseling through this. I mean, almost, hour by hour, nonstop. And the stories of personal suffering that come through are really almost overwhelming sometimes. Everybody is experiencing profound loss in some way. We're losing our freedom. We're losing our freedom to go outside, go to a restaurant. We're losing our freedom to go to a gym. We're losing. I talked to a woman who is really quite frantic because she can't visit her 96-year-old mother in a convalescent home right down the street. It's locked down. She cannot have a face-to-face contact with her own mother, right? People are losing their jobs, millions of people. They're losing their income. In some ways, they think they're losing their sanity. Now, and this is just starting. So the thing that I think has been helpful to a lot of people is I've wanted them to really acknowledge this. First of all, embrace it in yourself and figure out, what are you grieving right now, and where are you in your stages of grief? Because if you can't get to that point of acceptance, you are going to be sort of panicky and reactive in your business. All right. So give yourself some time to breathe and understand where this plays out in the context of your life and the life of your customers. And then extend this understanding and grace to your customers, that even if this is like some hardcore B2B purchasing agent that you're working with, they're suffering, they're grieving. And so how would you connect to someone who's grieving? Would you be there at a funeral and say, hey, 25% off my new podcast course? Would you say, hey, I'm just introducing this new online thing about, leadership consulting? That's just not going to connect. What would you say to people who are grieving? You'd say, how can I help you right now? I'm so sorry for what you're going through. We are there for you, in the good times and the bad times. What can me and my company do to help you recover from these losses, right? That's what I mean about reimagining your business and your strategy in the context of this moment. We may not be relevant. You got to throw that out. All the things you love, your product and your ideas and your services and your strategy, you got to come to the hard, cold facts that you may not be relevant in this moment. You may be relevant a month from now or 2 months from now, but right now we've got to reimagine where we are and connect to people in a compassionate and grace-filled way based on where they are in this moment.
Another helpful perspective I saw from you recently was really thinking of this idea that this is your war and your story, and write it well. And whether we like it or not, as individuals, as organizations, we're in this liminal space, this space of pressure and forging, where we're going to come out differently on the other side. We will emerge on the other side of this as just a different person, a different organization. I've really been trying to think through this lens of, aspirationally, how can I improve individually, serve others? How can we be improving our business? So what does it look like to embrace writing your story well in this season?
Well, what I did in this post is sort of try to reframe our suffering in a positive way. Okay, so a quote from a book that has always stuck with me is from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's almost not a book. It's sort of a pamphlet. It's so small. But one of the quotes in the book is, I got to paraphrase here because I'm probably drawing a blank on the precise quote, but it's something like, to be human is to suffer. And how we handle our suffering defines us as human beings. So that's kind of the underlying idea behind this post, is that, look, we are all suffering. We really are. And how we handle this, how we let this define us, is going to be our story. It's going to be our narrative. It's the story we're going to tell to our children and grandchildren and our friends and our family, because we are in the middle of history. This is one of the most important events in the history of the world. It's a war. And we all play a part of it. We're all struggling for our personal and professional survival. So what's the story that you're going to tell when this is over? What's the story that people are going to tell about you? The underlying idea is, this is a time of suffering. How you handle that suffering is going to define you. I reframe that in terms of, what's the story? What's the story? Take control of the story. Don't let it happen to you. Write that narrative yourself and do it every day, and do it really without compromise.
Another way, Mark, that you've been serving the community as you've been hosting these Embracing the Chaos free and open masterminds on your Facebook page. Would love to hear a little bit about like what you've learned just interacting with the people that have been participating in those, or some things you hadn't really maybe personally realized just as you're engaging and interacting with that. What's been the fruit of that experience?
Well, the difficulty with Facebook Live, and maybe it's not the right format and the right technology, but it's something that's sort of near in, connects to a lot of the people who follow me and listen to me and trust me. But there's the deficit with a Facebook Live is it's that you don't really have conversation. You get questions and answers, which then I again broadcast about. So it's I don't really like that aspect of it, but it sort of puts a near term band-aid, I think, on something. And I just, again, we talked about earlier, Shaun, about this idea of reframing what you do in the context of today. Well, I have a background in coaching and counseling. I have a master's degree in applied behavioral sciences. And, I could actually be a licensed counselor. I haven't pursued that, but, I could be, but I'm good at it. I've got this thing on my website where you can sign up for an hour of my time. I've done hundreds of these and I'm good at it. And I said, okay, this is something that people need and something that I'm good at. How do I do this in a bigger way? How do I touch hundreds of people, not one an hour every day? So this is my response, and I'm getting a good response from it. I think the first one had like over 1,000 people look at it. And the response has been great, and people are sharing it, commenting it. They're asking good questions. So, it's maybe there's something else I can be doing to blow it out even bigger, but it's the best I can do right now.
Well, it's almost time for us to wrap up, but if you had to frame it, Mark, as we look ahead to marketing throughout the rest of 2020, what if you had to give us like a summary of the road ahead, what do you think that is from the perspective you have right now?
Well, to sum it up, as briefly as I can, someone wrote to me yesterday and she said, your book, Marketing Rebellion, The Most Human Company Wins, was prophetic. Because if you see what's happening in this world, the ones that are embracing the core ideas behind that book, that if you're able to really connect truly in a human and compassionate way, you're going to win. All right. Not just checking a box. And I'm seeing big failures because people are wedded to advertising and business and marketing models that just don't work. They didn't work before the coronavirus, and they're certainly not going to work now. But if you see the companies that are already in transition, all right, they're flexing, they're nimble, they're moving, they're reimagining. That's exactly what I talk about in this book, right? So if I just had to say, one thing, we already talked about this idea of looking at where people are in this moment, connecting in a compassionate way that acknowledges their grief. Look, the most human company wins. I believe that with every fiber of my body. And those are the companies that will make it to the other side. So we need to be thinking about how can we show that? How can we show our heart, our caring, our compassion, our passion, our helpfulness in everything we do, in every email, text message, meeting, phone call, Think about, Shaun. People are making fun of all these stupid emails we're getting right now from companies we really don't have anything to do with. Oh, here's our response to Corona. We want to keep all of you safe. Thank you, Mr. Cable Company. And I'm getting dozens of it's just, that's not human, right? I wrote this blog post. It wasn't a very popular blog post, but it was one of my favorites. It talks about how a lot of companies are really grape lollipops, right? A grape lollipop is not really grape. It doesn't taste like a real grape. There's no grape in it, but some corporate industrial person, said, all right, here's the color and here's the flavor, and forever, that's grape candy. The companies that are trying to be human right now are not, most of them are not being human. They're being grape lollipops. They're not really being human. They're checking a box and saying, yeah, we think that's human, but it's not real human. Where's the compassion? Where's the humanity? Where's the vulnerability? That's human, right? So that's what we need to embrace. And that's what I talked exactly about. I use those words in that book, Marketing Rebellion. And so you and I talked about this a few months ago, and this is the irony. It's still the best thing to be doing right now is to, the most human company wins.
And Mark, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, subscribe to your podcast, find out more about your books, where are some of the places we can connect with you on the web?
Well, the best place is Businesses Grow. You don't have to remember my name or how to spell it, but if you can remember businessesgrow.com, you can find my blog. I've reframed my blog. I've reimagined my blog. I'm not talking about the stuff I used to talk about. I'm talking right now, I'm writing about, customers in this moment. I've reframed our podcast. My podcast, the Marketing Companion, you can find there the books that we've mentioned on the show. You can find that all at businessesgrow.com.
And like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Mark, subscribe to his podcast, and check out his various books. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Mark Schaefer. Again, if you'd like to connect with Mark, check out his books and subscribe to the podcast. A great place to start is his website. You can view that at businessesgrow.com. And Mark, I just want to say thanks so much for being generous with your time. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, my friend.
Thank you, Shaun. It's been a delight.